Yo, what's good? It's your boy Jay Rana, and today we got ourselves a video called "Are the Ages of Building Super Teams Over With in the National Basketball Association?" Yeah, so a lot of this is reflecting on the Nets series and how they got swept by the Celtics, and sort of how this process all began. I mean, you had KD and Kyrie signed to the Nets in the offseason. You had Karis LeVert. You had Jared Allen, and then you pretty much get rid of those two guys to bring in James Harden. And then the season goes on. Kyrie is out. So then you got KD and Harden in the playoffs. They make it to round 2 to face off against the Bucks. They lose in 7, and things were looking really promising for the Nets heading into next season. And then it goes into next season, and you got Kyrie not really being able to play a lot of the games due to the COVID situation. You got KD dealing with some injuries. You had Harden dealing with some stuff. And then Harden decides that he wants to leave the Brooklyn Nets because of difference of opinions on how the team should be run. And then he goes over to Philly to get a guy who says his back hurts because of his head. And then this season, like I said, we saw the Nets get swept by the Celtics in 4 in the first round. And now you're the Nets and you think, well, what do we do now? And that will be another video that I will go over in the future. The reason why I say this, you look back at, the past couple years, past decade and on, you look at some of these teams right here, just explained it. I mean, who would have thought that you look at a picture of these three guys right here on the same team, and when this happened, everyone was saying how this is OP, how it's going to be Nets against Lakers. That never ended up happening. That was a year as the Bucks versus Suns, because the Lakers went out in the first round and the Nets went out to the Bucks in the second. And then people were looking on and they're like, there's no way that this big three, if they stay together, don't make a big run. And although we didn't get to see a lot of them, we didn't really... I think we probably saw a total of like 20 to 25 games where all three of them were on the court at once, which is just absolutely ridiculous for having 2 full seasons of basketball. But yeah, you don't get to see that. And now if you're the Brooklyn Nets, not saying that their championship window is closed, because they're still going to get Ben Simmons back next year. They're still probably going to have KD and Kyrie. And they're probably going to make some other moves. But, I mean, you look at it, and the Nets gave up a lot of draft picks. They gave up guys like Jared Allen, who is now a young all-star in this league officially. Karis LeVert, who is still a very quality role player. And like I said, yeah, those draft picks, I mean, you gave up quite a bit to come and assemble this team. And even that Nets team in the past, dude, that Nets team that had... Kenny Atkinson, D'Lo, like that was a fun-ass team to watch. And then you cleared house to pretty much not get too much success from there. But, yeah, and then you know what this reminds me of? It kind of reminds me of this Nets team. Kind of does, where the Nets, gave up a lot of draft picks to the Boston Celtics, which ended up being in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And... the Nets could be in a situation right now where they have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. All I gotta say. But, you look at this team, they gave up very, very nice draft picks to bring in an aging Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, although Kevin Garnett was still nice. Kevin Garnett was averaging, like, the year before he got traded to the Nets, he was averaging, I think 18 points and 10 rebounds for the Celtics, something like that. Paul Pierce was still a solid player. You had Darian Williams, who... the season before that was an all-star player. This team had Jarrett Jack. This team had ISO Joe. I think they had... Did they have Lopez? They might have had Brooke Lopez as well as an all-star. Yeah, this team was nasty. And, they dealt with... You can see this title from the old article. They did deal with, some injuries. But even when they were healthy, they just didn't look too great. And this kind of reminds me a lot of this situation right here, in which the Nets, giving up some draft picks to get some of these guys. And so far it hasn't worked out great. And then you look at this super team that was built. This super team is a little bit different, though. But this is a super team that was really just built off of, the players they drafted, like Russ, Harden, KD, and I think even Ibaka were all guys that were drafted onto the team. So that's a little bit of a different scenario, but you could see there an example of a super team that just wasn't really able to work out and result in all of them getting traded eventually. You better not have shit in the house, bro. And then we look here with the Clippers team that had CP3, DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, JJ Redick, Jamal Crawford, Matt Barnes. They had a super team going on there. Couldn't get the job done. I felt like their best season to really win the championship was when they did deal with some injuries there. I think it was CP3 who had that injury that resulted in the Clippers struggling. But and then when they were healthy, they just couldn't really make it past the later rounds. But yeah, man, I mean, you look at these super teams, and every time you look at a super team, like, you look at this team, you're like, there's no way they're not going to win the championship. Like, when this initially happened, everyone was saying the Nets were guaranteed to at least make the NBA championship. And it just never happened. So now, and I know there are the Warriors, that team with KD, Curry, and Clay. So people are probably thinking, like, what do you mean? How, super teams could still become successful? Look at this. Which is true. And I do think it takes a lot of things to have a super team and win a championship. It takes guys being willing to sort of get rid of that ego and become more team orientated and sort of work together and not, really care about, because you look at that another example that I forgot to mention. How could I forget the Boston Celtics team that had Tatum, Kyrie, Horford, Hayward. I know I can't type. And this is as a Celtics fan. So, oh my God, I hate looking at this picture, man. Oh, I hate looking at this picture. But yeah, I mean, you look at here, another example of I would consider this a near to close super team, and they couldn't even make it past the second round with the full healthy team. I know without Kyrie and Hayward, they were able to make it to the conference championship. But when healthy, man, second round exits to the Bucks. Jason Tatum on the JJ Redick podcast, if you didn't watch it, he sort of went over everything behind it and how, like, everyone was trying to prove themselves. Tatum and Brown, two young players, really wanted to prove themselves to get those contracts for the future. Especially in those early years, you're not really so used to being on such a successful and great team. So they're trying everything they can to sort of, bring out their name and stuff like that. And then you got Kyrie, who was also trying to make a statement for himself to prove that he could be the number one guy in a championship team. Yeah, it just didn't really work out well because you had a lot of players that were trying to sort of fend for themselves. So yeah, I mean, you look at this Warriors team, this is an example of a super team that worked. But I think out of all the super teams that we've looked at, it's crazy to think how unsuccessful they've been. And I think at the point and the direction this league is going in is there's so many young and hungry players in the league. Kyrie Irving was saying it too, how there's just like everyone you go against, they want to, show you up, play their best game. It's such a young league now. Everyone's young, everyone's athletic, everyone's talented, everyone knows the ins and outs of the basketball game. It's just a lot harder for you to look at an NBA team and being like, okay, this is a team that is guaranteed to win an NBA championship no matter how stacked the team is, because there's so many different things that could happen. And this Warriors team, I do think, was a little bit of an exception. Also, 3 of the 4 players here were already drafted onto the team. It's not like they were traded or had to give up a lot of draft picks. And KD, they didn't really trade for. KD, they got in free agency. So that's also an example of why I think the Warriors super team was a little bit out, not really similar to this Nets team right here. But yeah, I think I'm looking at teams like the Boston Celtics, like the Memphis Grizzlies, like the Phoenix Suns, who sort of built from the ground up. And I know the Suns, obviously, they traded for Chris Paul, and they did. Was it trade or in free agency? No, I think it was free agency. Yeah, they didn't trade. So, I mean, you look at a lot of these teams that are really good now, the Bucks and all these the Bucks, who just recently won a championship. I mean, they were practically built from the ground up in our small market teams. So I think the ages of super teams, maybe teams are looking and they're like, hey, we're going to keep our draft picks, we're going to keep our guys, and we're just going to try and develop this team the way that we should without having to force anything or force any players in, because it's a lot harder than you think to, create chemistry with top guys, because, they went for trying to prove themselves to be better to now, okay, how am I going to work with this guy who I was trying to be better than, so that we can both get what we want and win a championship. So I think there's a lot that goes into it. But yeah, I feel like I hit on everything that I wanted to hit. But like I said, the league is so talented nowadays. I mean, you look at the bottom teams in the league, and they pretty much have an all-star. I mean, look at the Pistons. I can tell you that next year, Cade Cunningham would be in consideration for an all-star. Not that he probably will be, because I don't think the Pistons will do too great. But what I mean is that every, bad team, or I don't even have to do this, every bad team has, a near all-star caliber player. But yeah, I mean, you look at the Lakers. Lakers didn't even make the play-in tournament. They had not KD. They had LeBron, AD, and Westbrook. And I was going to put the Lakers in here to talk about that. I don't know if I really considered it a super team. I know some people consider a super team and other people don't. I mean, definitely not now because they weren't great. Probably people are going to say that. But you could still not make the playoffs and be considered a super team. You just were far off from expectations. My Wi-Fi is shitting the bed, apparently. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. And also, don't forget to turn on those post notifications so you don't miss any future videos. And peace.